Hi, I'm Edward Funk. This is podcast 85. Loretta Young's husband discovers the dark side of a fairy tale. Now, Loretta had been married to Tom Lewis for 10 years. She reflected, by that time in our marriage, I was honest enough to ask him, why are you so miserable? He said, well, I think it's your career. Actress and a wife. It wasn't long after this conversation that Loretta was returning from a publicity tour out east promoting Key to the City. She recalled, returning on the train, I had a couple of days to myself. During those days, I searched my mind and my heart. I thought, well, if it really is my career that's going to split our marriage and ruin our children's lives, then I have to do something about it. Now, this is my voice, Edwards. Keep in mind that after 80-some movies, Loretta had proved herself as a movie star, and having won a Best Actress Oscar, proved herself as an actress. She really didn't have anything less to prove. Now, back to Loretta's voice. When I got home the first night after dinner, I explained to Tom I thought and prayed about it and had made a decision. If it was my career that was causing all the havoc, then I was going to quit acting and buckle down and be a full-time wife and mother. He could take a job any place in the world that he chose. Chris Beat and I would go with him. They were young enough to adjust. But Judy was 16. Oh, this page is sticking together. Here we go. Judy was 16 and her lifestyle was set. Mama, who loved Judy dearly, would welcome her into her home. That would leave him free, meaning Tom was, to actually be the head of the family. No more husband of the movie star that you hate. He said that was the best news he'd ever heard, that he was totally overjoyed. And I was relieved because I thought I found the key to our happiness. But that was the last time he ever mentioned it. He never brought the subject up again. Loretta continues, his fantasy was one thing, reality was another. The psychiatrist who was counseling us explained to me that my career had been a good excuse for Tom to be miserable. But once I took the excuse away, he panicked. That wasn't what he wanted at all. He wanted to marry a movie star, and he did. And he wanted me to take care of him, and I did. And he wanted his kids to have the best that they could have, and they did. And he felt bad about it. It was the dark side of a fairy tale world. So maybe the film Cause for Alarm would help boost Tom's fragile self-esteem. Loretta explained, Dory Sherry, who is now running MGM, said to me, now we'll back on Dory Sherry, he had produced two of Loretta's favorite movies of her whole career. One was The Farmer's Daughter, which she won an Oscar, and the other one was Rachel and the Stranger, which I think she loved it, with William Holden and Robert Mitchum. She loved it, and it made tons of money. It was the third biggest moneymaker for RKO. So now back to Dory. Now at MGM, but telling everybody if anything you want to do, let me know. Now, I first heard Calls for Alarm as a regular drama, and I suggested to Tom that he get the script and take it over to Dory. It was really a labor of love because here we go. Because it would launch Tom as a movie producer. Sherry agreed to back the project. Barry Sullivan co-starred. He played the dying but paranoid husband who terrorized his wife played by Loretta, because he suspected her infidelity. Joe is considered MGM's best cameraman, and that's who Loretta wanted. She remembered Dory called me and said, Loretta, everything else is fine, but Joe Ruttenberg is scheduled to do another picture. You're playing an average little housewife, so it's not that important what you look like. I said, I know. I want to play an average but pretty little housewife. I think it adds appeal, and it certainly makes me more comfortable. There are a lot of heavy moments in this picture, and unless it's well photographed, it won't be very appealing. He said, well, let me think about it. So he called back in a little while and he said, okay, you've got Gutenberg. A major part of the story had Loretta trying to stop a letter that contained damaging allegations from getting to the district attorney. There were several scenes of her running down the street trying to retrieve the letter from the postman. Loretta's older sister and her Pollyanna and her sister Pollyanna and her family lived on Alpine Street in Beverly Hills, and that's the street that was chosen for the location shooting so that Loretta was able to have lunch with her. Now, Loretta took a nasty fall in one of her running scenes, and one day while shooting at the MGM studio in Culver City, she went over to the chiropractor's office in the Irving Thalberg building. Loretta called. I ran into Spencer Tracy, and I hadn't seen him in a long time. I was thrilled to see him, frankly, and apparently he was thrilled to see me. We stopped and talked on the steps. He had been to see Margot Fontaine dance the night before, and that's what we talked about. But it was another moment, much like the visit he paid Loretta at the Sunset House in 1935, when she's bundled up in bed trying to hide her pregnancy. In other words, they talked about one thing, yet conveyed something else. Loretta remembered it as a wonderful moment, lightheaded and intimate, and very, very full of understanding. They would never have such a moment with each other again. Tom was out to prove his worth as a movie producer and has set a goal to bring the film in an unassuming budget of $700,000. Loretta had misgivings. She explained, I knew the business well enough to know that unless you spend $3 or $4 million, you don't get any kind of advertising budget. Okay, let's have uncooperative today. Okay, here we go. So we rehearsed 4 or 5 days and then shot the whole picture in 16 days. Tom felt that because he brought it in under budget, he'd get a gold star and from the front office and probably a contract to do more low budget pictures. He had, he had been a radio producer, so he was used to radio budgets where the bottom line was vitally important to the sponsors. This wasn't the case with most imperials. I've seen producers deliberately stringing the shooting of a picture just to ensure the ad budget. Anyway, Dory didn't offer him anything else to do after that. Cause for alarm did much his career because he wanted to do it his way instead of theirs. In other words, Tom knew best. He was going to school with the MGM brass. They weren't interested. Now, Variety summed it up. Cause for alarm is still a secondary feature, not likely to cut a swath at the box office. Ms. Young provides it with marquee value and her usual thespian excellence. But the film reflected the difficulty trying to stretch a 30-minute radio idea over a 74-minute celluloid course. Now, Loretta's own review was much more enthusiastic, as she wrote 2 inscriptions in the front of a bound script that eventually belonged to their son, Christopher. So the first inscription, to Tom, our producer, with my deepest appreciation for a wonderful script and a perfect job of producing. Result, my favorite picture, Loretta Young. Now, second inscription, to Tom, my beloved husband, happy birthday, dear, and may our dear Lord continue to watch over you and love you. Another year of full fulfillment for which I am increasingly grateful. Forever, me. If only Loretta's written sentiments had any connection with reality. Calls for alarms failure to bring attention to Tom Lewis made him feel all the more restless, and the Lewises were on the move again. This time they were buying Huntington Hartford's home in West Hollywood, and the extensive renovation would take 2.5 years. In the interim, they rented Harry Warner's beach house in Santa Monica. Now, in the next podcast, number 86, Loretta relates what it was like to go to Troy, New York, and spend the Christmas holiday with Tom's family. For Loretta, it wasn't a joy. So we'll discuss that the next time I see you. Thank you.